Correct. But
It spills over.
Legally non-conforming.
Well, it's been there. The town could always order it out because, or the state could, I suppose. But it's been there and it's been operating that way, and you know, there hasn't been a driving reason to say stop it. This may be a point at which you need to say that. You know, it's again, it's a judgment call.
Yep.
But anyway, so it's been working, and there's a certain amount of grandfathering that goes on here now. So now you got to decide whether this opens everything up and requires, you know, taking away some of those grandfathered rights.
Right. You can have a comment. You can finish up the last comment, and then we're going to discuss this as a board.
Okay, thank you. I'd also just like to understand better, I know federal law requires one van accessible ADA space, and I can't see the plan that well, and I don't see that on either phase 1 or 2. Where is the one ADA van accessible space on both plans?
Very good.
I think I can shed some light on the recent discussions. 3 points. The first point is when we started this endeavor with staff, we were asked to demonstrate that per code we could meet all the parking requirements, and we can. It does sacrifice the green space, the buffer yards. Mm-hmm. Other than that, we can put per code 17 spaces with proper 24-foot circulation on these 2 lots, which he owns both of them. So we can do it legally per code for the parking. Now, then we took that and said, but does that fit with the context of the community and this strip? Do we really want a 24-foot access point with double-loaded aisles separating these 2 properties and, you know, a big sea of pavement rather than some green space, et cetera? That's how we got to where we are. The handicap space, the ADA accessible space, is something that we have intended to deal with in site plan review. We can certainly put one in. There's space to do that. This is a zoning hearing. This is not a site plan hearing. So that's why we haven't addressed that situation. We haven't addressed grading and drainage and things like that either.
You had mentioned that before.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. So, there was a third point that we just, her last point wasn't ADA. I thought it was a different point.
Handicap, rooming house, rooms, anything like that?
Oh, yes. Actually, the space in the right-of-way,
Yeah.
that is, correct me if I'm wrong, Aaron, approximately 15 feet away from his front porch. His entire front porch is in the right-of-way.
Correct. You can see it outside.
So, I mean, you know, where do you draw the line? These are pre-existing non-conforming conditions.
Very good.
Thank you.
I'm going to close the public hearing and limit discussion to the board. All right, we've had some very good public input. Thank you. We have decided that this is a workable solution. Our next step is, it appears to me that option number 3, workable solution with additional limitations. Let's figure out what those are.
Mr. Chairman, could I walk through them and just ask how you want to deal with each one? And then there may be others that you want to do as well. But one is, do you want to limit the type of restaurant by, for example, saying no franchise, no multiple location, this is a one site, one location only restaurant?
Very good. Can we address these as you list them off?
Yes.
Very good. Thoughts on that?
I agree.
I think we were all in consensus.
Okay.
How that language is derived, I'd be curious to see.
Yeah, there are models out there for this, because there are communities that limit such things in their downtowns and other places. So
Okay.
I'm familiar with that language, and it can be done.
So that's recommendation number 1.
Yeah. Secondly, would you like to require the phase 2, that is the reconfiguration of the parking, now, and so that there would be the aisles and the backup space? Or do you prefer to have a trigger that would cause that to happen, and that trigger might be something like 30 trip ends compared with the 20 trip ends that they measured in February?
Thoughts on that?
I would think the 30 with a trigger would be reasonable.
Okay.
I would agree to 30.
So keep the original lot configuration.
My understanding is that Aaron is hoping to keep the green space without having to increase the extra parking, but he would appreciate the access to the additional parking, and the trigger of 30 would work well for me.
Okay.
I did not hear what Mike said.
I'm
All
sorry.
right, we've talked about reducing the trigger, so 40 trips, so that would mean currently his peak hour is 10 people in 1 hour. That's 10 people in, 10 people out, so we're at 20. So now it would be 15 people in, 15 people out. A trigger of 30 would cause him to go to phase 2.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, we should say, be very explicit that phase 2 with site plan review, because now you're dealing with drainage and other.
There's a whole bunch of issues,
things.
the ADA requirements, they did mention that that's a part of a site plan thing, so, I mean, all that will come with a site plan review before our board.
So-
That would take some time, though, right?
Phase 2, they would have to come in before this board and do a minor site plan
Yes.
review.
Because what I'm thinking is if, luck is in your future, and all of a sudden you hit 30 relatively quickly, how long would it take before things could expand?
It would be about it'd be probably be from the time they realize it, design it, submit for review, it's probably, 60 days. And then they got to build it, of course.
Right.
And if it's in the wintertime, they would have to wait probably till construction season. But there would be a little bit of,
I assume that they've actually thought about that as part of,
Right,
because they
I'm just thinking
presented.
about,
yeah.
we may find ourselves in a bit of a traffic situation while we wait for all this to happen. And so that's my only concern.
yeah, and I think, I just want to underscore you could decide to go to phase 2 now, or you could decide on the trigger. So that's what you're discussing.
Right, and so I'm thinking about which way I want to go.
Right.
That's what I wanted to
Yep.
clarify.
What, based on what Evan mentioned on the 30, or would you prefer phase 2?
You would have to ask me that.
Gotta know.
Yeah, I know. I guess I would sort of prefer phase 2 now, but I'm probably gonna get outvoted, so,
Krista?
yeah.
I have the sense that Aaron would prefer to have a trigger for phase 2 and do it when the traffic is up to there. And so I'm inclined to go with that model and have the trigger at 30. And it's unlikely that there's going to be an explosion of business so that after 5 years. So I think there's time for them to make a plan and bring it to us and have us okay it, and then they still have to build it, so.
Kristen, you could not hear me. You said that that's exactly what I said.
Yeah. Okay. I'm okay. I mean, like I said, I've lived there. I've seen the traffic come and go. So I've seen what goes on there currently. And I understand the comments from the public about I don't want to create a worse situation. It's been going on like that for a while. The town hasn't kicked them out of that right-of-way opportunity. So I guess I'm inclined to allow phase 1, and if I agree with the trigger, I think we can reduce that to 30. Hopefully his business grows and he'll have to go this route anyways, but if it's worked for a while, I'm okay to let that ride for a little bit and stick with phase 1 with that reduced threshold. All right, Evan, there was another one.
Yes, if there is evidence of parking on Park Street, the town could require, and the applicant would be obligated to go to site plan review for the new parking plan.
Right.
Within a 60-day period or within some specified short period of time.
Okay, thoughts on that? And our whole discussion, this matches with a comp plan, but if it starts to not match with a comp plan, pedestrian and biker or biking safety was like one of the biggest points that we considered for a number of years. I do not want to see this business impacting any bikeability and the multi transport modes that we talked about. So I'm going to advocate quite strongly for this. I think the applicant understands that if this situation gets worse, if we hit that trigger and he starts to see cars parking on Park Street, things have to change.
Agreed.
I think that's very prudent.
Even if they're parking on Park Street to avoid getting stuck in your lot, does that make sense? Even if they're parking on the main road to avoid getting caught up in your lot? So what if someone just parked on the main road instead of pulling in because they don't want to get stuck in there, not being able to back in and back out or whatever? Would that be a trigger?
I mean, if it's a routine,
Yeah, that's what I would see.
I think what I'm kind of just, part of the worry here is the parking's going to be insufficient and people will start simply parking on Park Street.
Pulling on a,
And that's in a bike lane. So if that becomes a routine occurrence, then the suggestion is that the town has the authority under this contract zone to require, and they're obligated to come in with a fix, an on-site fix, and that might be more than phase two. It might be, something bigger.
How do we monitor that? Because we can, again, that you said the town doesn't want to rely, the town would.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're talking about
Yeah.
police department observation, public works observation, code enforcement observation, and, when there are issues, we get complaints.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure there was a mechanism so that we don't have to rely on
Right.
the applicant to provide us those numbers.
you would hear it from the people who ride the bikes all the time. If they
Oh, yeah.
every time they go by a
That
certain
can't
area,
happen.
they have to pull out onto the street.
That's not what we want to do.
Right.
Right.
The other thing, by the way, I heard, and it was a good catch, I never focused on, but the sign should not be in the public right-of-way. I know that there's a parking space there, but the sign, especially if it gets a little bit bigger, which they'd be allowed to do, should not be in the public right-of-way.
Right, because if we can reduce the nonconformity in any way, I agree with that. So we agreed with the signage. So we have 4 recommendations to amend the proposed contract zone that the applicants provided. So, Evan, procedurally, it's been a while since we've done one of these, so is that enough that we have a motion for an amended contract zone to go back to council? That's what
Correct.
we need.
That's what you'd be recommending. That's
All
correct. Amended with the 4 items as you have described.
Any other items? I can't think of any based on public comment and what I'm thinking about, so we've got 4. All right. So, I couldn't come up with any. All right, I think we need a motion, please. If someone remembers all 4, or if we have some guidance from Evan.
I mean, the motion could be that you, I'll just restate exactly what you've just said,
Okay,
which is, the motion could be that you recommend a contract zone, contract C2 zone for 12 Park and 14 Park Street, with the following changes to the proposed agreement. 1, to limit the type of restaurant such that no franchise or multiple location, that this is not part of a franchise or a multiple location restaurant chain. Secondly, that the trigger for trip ends be reduced from 40 to 30, and that when that trigger occurs, the phase 2 parking would be required with van accessible space included. Third, that evidence of routine parking on Park Street would require the applicant to come in to the planning board for site plan review with parking that would mitigate that situation. And fourth, the sign advertising the restaurant must be moved out of the public right-of-way.
Very good. All right, someone please make a motion.
Can I move what Evan said?
Yes, I think
So moved, yeah.
Is that all right?
Procedurally, then, we good?
I would second that.
So, if that's okay, and we have a motion, we have a second, any further discussion? All those in favor? Very good. Just, again, another procedural point for members of the public. This goes on to council. Council will review it and have their own public hearing.
Yes, I would expect the council to meet in committee, and we can notify anybody who wants to be notified of when that will
So there is
happen.
another opportunity.
I believe
to have the
that,
same
and I
discussion.
think this will go to council at it's too late to go to its May meeting. It can't be advertised and proper notice given, so it'll go into its June meeting, which is the second Monday of the month, 7 o'clock. And they must conduct their own public hearing. They cannot act that night. They must wait at least 30 days. Or they must wait until the next meeting. It doesn't have to be 30 days. It could be 14 days or something like that. But it must wait till the next business meeting to act on the proposal.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Moving on. Old business. It is 9 o'clock, so I'm not quite sure on this particular item. We have a continuation of an ordinance amendment, the land use ordinance, section 8.
Yes, this is, at the last meeting, the planning board held hearings on 4 proposed amendments. The first set of amendments that are starting to implement pieces of the comprehensive plan, and these are relatively small scale, i.e. self-contained types of amendments. They're not the big reverberating amendments that have impacts on, wide-ranging impacts. Just by way of FYI, 2 of those amendments went to, the 2 that you recommended to the council went to public hearing earlier this month, and they will act on them in May, and that's the light pole signage and amendments to some of the dimensional standard utilities around cluster development. Home occupation, which was also heard, those changes, and that you already recommend, but is on hold because there's a missing piece that has to do with another amendment that the council has not yet dealt with. So that's on hold. And the 4th amendment was this one, where the planning board tabled this one and directed staff to come back with some changes. And we've done that, and that's what you have in your packet, and I can describe what that is. This is an amendment that would create a definition in the ordinance of house guest. This is part of a package of elements, or a series of elements that you'll see over time, trying to make sure that there's a proper balance of student housing in established neighborhoods, and families living in their homes. Defining house guest is one way to increase the enforceability of some of the rules around rental housing in our districts. So the definition hasn't changed. The definition remains as it was. What is changed is in section 18-81, violations of land use ordinance, that language, and it's on the back side of your thing. What we had said previously, it came before you originally, was that if the code enforcement officer had grounds to believe that there may be a violation of the number of unrelated persons living in a dwelling unit, that the code enforcement officer could, in writing, request the property owner and lessees for certain piece of information, and it was pretty open-ended. The planning board discussed this and said that the open-ended nature of that would not work because it would be unfair to ask a landlord, and unworkable to ask a landlord to get information that the landlord may not be able to get secure from tenants. And you can't ask lessees because there's no way to require them to submit anything. So, this is now reworked to say that, if you go down to about the middle of that paragraph, the code enforcement officer may make a written request of the property owner for copies of signed leases or similar signed legal agreements documenting the names and numbers of tenants residing in the dwelling unit, for a list of names of persons known to the property owner to be living in the dwelling unit but are not signatories to the lease, and their relationships to lessees, and an affidavit that no other person unrelated to the lessees are either authorized by or known to the property owner to be living in the dwelling unit. So those are all things that we know the landlord can provide. It's not going to be a definitive answer, but it begins a pathway of discovery to determine whether there is a problem here or not. And it's,
Judd raised some concerns.
those were the concerns that Judd had raised, that was too open-ended.
And you ran these by the town attorney as
Yes,
far as
yes.
these are reasonable
Right,
documents?
yes. So now, we won't be asking for licenses or
Birth certificates.
birth certificates or things that A, might be unreasonable to ask for, but B, that the landlord might reasonably not be expected to be able to get. And that was Judd's concern. He said, you're going to hold me responsible and possibly in violation and fine me, or a landlord, for trying to get things that they can't get. And I need to know up front what that list of things would be so that I can ask for those things at the time that they're signing our lease. And of course, we don't know what that long list would be or what it should be, so we just narrowed it down to these things. It gets you on the path toward discovery, and if you get to a matter where it goes to court, the courts can order more stuff that the court thinks are reasonable.
In town staff view, this is sufficient.
Yes.
To allow Bill to request some information
Yes,
that's going to get us down that path.
yep. So the question is this acceptable, and are you ready to recommend this, or with, as is, or any additional changes to the
Out
council?
of curiosity, did Judd happen to review this? He's not here this evening, but,
He didn't say anything.
He didn't say anything, he's had it for a week.
okay, there we go. Questions or comments? I didn't participate. I read the meeting minutes, listened to Evan's explanation. Seems reasonable to get us the teeth. That's what we've always lacked, is the teeth to enforce some of our ordinances. And town staff has spent some time on it. You all discussed it last time. Does this seem to meet the concerns from last time?
Yes, it does. Changes, yes.
Okay, any additions?
No.
Make a motion.
Make a motion, please.
Move that we suggest that we agree with the proposed amendment to the land use ordinance to define house guest and add reference to a definition on the definition of family.
We're good to have a motion. Can I have a second, please?
Second.
Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Good, thank you, town staff. Next item on our agenda, new business, election of a chairman and a vice chairman for the coming year.
Is our current chairman willing to serve again?
I have mentioned to staff that I'm willing to do that. I have been away a little bit more than I prefer to be. So I've missed a couple more meetings than I have in a number of years, but I'm still willing to do it. I am going to be probably be a little more reliant on a vice chair for that, but I am willing to serve in chair as the chair for another year. I'll give you another year.
So somebody needs to nominate him and somebody needs
Okay,
to
well, I
second.
nominate Phil Rocker to be the chair.
Discussion. Further discussion. Thank you. I appreciate your support. Or just everybody steps back. Next item. So thank you on that.
Vote on it?
What's that? I guess we got a vote. Yeah. So all those in favor, I guess. Very good. Thank you. Election of a vice chairman for the coming year. I just anecdotally, I had spoken to Judd. He was, I guess, the person that sits to my left had always, seemed to have been the person that stepped up. He had mentioned he didn't jump up and down. He did say that he was I guess I don't-
He would do it if no one else would do it.
Yeah, do it if no one else would
He's
do
not here,
it.
and that's dangerous.
But that's the thing.
I told
Judd
him
is
that.
not here.
They'll do,
And that,
teach them.
that's,
I
yeah,
warned him.
that's the lesson. What I mentioned to Judd, and I'm not sure if the rest of you are okay with this, but he's a busy guy. You know, I'm been particularly busy lately, but if he would give us another year, we have a lot of new members and a lot of people that have been on it for a while. I just, you know, it was just a thought. He's made a lot of motions, so just my idea. I talked to him about it, but that was.
And is he willing to do it?
Yeah, he'll do it. Yeah, he'll do it.
I would nominate Judd as vice chair.
So
I'll
Second.
second.
there's other options. Yeah.
Who seconded?
I did.
You did? Okay.
Probably two or three of us did.
Well, he's not here. That's what happens. Yeah. So
I can put anybody's name down, I don't care.
I mean, it's a 1-year gig. So if you're okay with it, all those in favor? Sorry, Jed. All right, discussion. There wasn't one, but I haven't been here in a few meetings, and I meant to say this the last time. We lost a really good member, and Mark Kittredge. And Mark, what was it, 18 years? It was a long time.
It was a long time.
And I can't remember, but, you know, I watched Mark. He was, you know, vice chair, and then he took over the chair, but he gave this board and this town a lot of time. And I just felt it would be remiss if we didn't, I guess, publicly acknowledge him. I don't know if the council had, but there's not a lot of people stepping up to this job. You know, I don't know how you guys got suckered in. Dave and Kristen have been doing this a while, but Mark did a really good job, and I just wanted that on the record. That
Well, he brought a lot of wisdom to the job.
he did.
I
Very
didn't always
steady.
agree with him, but I thought he really did a great job and brought a lot of wisdom to the job.
I agree, and I on the record, just wanted to acknowledge him and his years of service.
If the board would like, I could write a letter expressing these sentiments for the chair's signature.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be.
Great, yep.
There's a lot to be said for institutional memory, and, you know, we've lost that, which is.
I could ask him if he'd like to be vice chair again.
All right, whatever. That's my
wants to do notes?
discussion piece. Any further
don't need a minute
discussion?
taker.
Moving on, we have an adjournment item.
Yeah, I do want to mention that we have a reasonably full agenda coming up in May. Third Wednesday, and it's going to be a short turnaround because this is the fourth week, not the third week, and now we're going to catch up to the third week. So we do have, Ruth, remind me, we have a proposed.
We have Orion, we have amended site plan for Treats Falls, and 2 ordinance amendments.
So that the council is incrementally passing on a couple at a time, so you'll get a couple more before you in May. So, and both site plans are amendments to previously approved plans, although Treats Falls is one that was approved many, many years ago, so, but it's an existing site.
Okay, thank you. Last up is adjournment. Can I have a motion, please?
Move we
So
adjourn.
moved.
Second.
Very good. Any discussion? All those in favor?
I appreciate the board's work tonight. I mean, you asked some good questions, and appreciate it. Here you go. I don't think I wrote on it. I had it all.
I was gonna say, you
No,
have 3 copies of it.
I know.